You've been doing everything right. The early mornings, the skipped meals, the workouts that leave you drenched and exhausted. You've tracked calories, cut carbs, pushed through soreness, and stayed consistent longer than most people ever do. And yet, when you look down, that stubborn belly fat is still there, sitting exactly where it was 6 weeks ago, completely unbothered by everything you've thrown at it. And the worst part isn't the fat itself. The worst part is what your brain starts to whisper after weeks of effort with nothing to show for it. It starts telling you that something is broken inside you, that you're the exception, that no matter what you do, your body simply refuses to cooperate. But here's what nobody ever tells you, and what changes everything once you understand it. Visceral fat doesn't shrink because of effort. It shrinks because of a specific biological shift that has to happen first. And until that shift occurs, every calorie deficit, every intense cardio session, every act of discipline is working against you. Let's start with what visceral fat actually is, because most people don't realize they've been thinking about it completely wrong. The fat you can pinch on your arms or your thighs is subcutaneous fat. It sits just beneath the skin. It's visible, and while it's stubborn in its own way, the body doesn't treat it as particularly precious. Visceral fat is different. It sits deep inside the abdominal cavity, wrapping itself around your liver, your kidneys, your intestines, your vital organs. And the reason your body stores fat there isn't random. It stores it there because it considers that fat strategically important. Think of it like emergency reserves kept as close to headquarters as possible. When the body senses danger or uncertainty, it needs energy that it can access fast. Visceral fat is positioned exactly where that rapid deployment can happen. This is not a design flaw. This is your biology working exactly as it was built to work. The problem is, your body can't always tell the difference between real physical danger and the kind of chronic, low-level stress that defines modern life. This is where cortisol enters the picture, and this is where most people's understanding of belly fat completely falls apart. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone. When something threatens you, whether physically or psychologically, cortisol rises to help you respond. Your heart rate increases, glucose floods your bloodstream, and your body gets ready to either fight or flee. This is a brilliant system when the threat is temporary, but here's where it gets complicated. Visceral fat contains a far higher concentration of cortisol receptors than any other fat tissue in your body. That means when cortisol is elevated, visceral fat cells receive a direct biochemical instruction to hold on and not release their stored energy. They're not resisting you out of stubbornness, they're following orders. And here's the part that most diet culture will never acknowledge. The things that feel like progress, like aggressive calorie restriction, intense daily workouts, pushing through exhaustion, those things raise cortisol. They feel like effort, but to your nervous system, they register as threat. And threat is exactly the signal that tells visceral fat to stay put and dig in deeper. Insulin makes this even more complex, and understanding its role here changes how you should think about food, timing, and energy altogether. Under normal circumstances, insulin regulates blood sugar smoothly and efficiently, but when cortisol is chronically elevated, insulin's role shifts. Instead of simply managing fuel, it starts prioritizing preservation. Blood sugar stays elevated longer than it should. Fat release gets suppressed. The body essentially goes into a hoarding mode, keeping energy circulating and available because it doesn't trust that stability is coming anytime soon. Now, layer on top of that the fact that most people trying to lose visceral fat are also sleeping poorly, eating irregularly, consuming caffeine throughout the day, and living with constant background anxiety. Every single one of those things is a biological stress signal. Your nervous system doesn't evaluate the reason for the stress. It doesn't care that you're stressed because of a deadline, not a predator. It only reads the signal. And the signal it keeps receiving day after day is that conditions are unpredictable and dangerous, so it keeps defending the fat. Here's the piece that makes everything click into place, and once you hear this, you'll never approach fat loss the same way again. Visceral fat doesn't shrink at the beginning of your effort. It shrinks at the end of a biological process that has to happen quietly, internally, and mostly invisibly before any visible change can happen. The very first change that has to happen before visceral fat is even allowed to shrink is not a calorie deficit reaching some magic threshold. It's not a workout becoming intense enough. It is the sustained reduction of baseline stress signaling in your body. Specifically, it's the nervous system shifting out of a state of constant low-grade vigilance. Think of it this way. Right now, if you're dealing with visceral fat that won't move, your body is partially braced at all times. Not fully in crisis mode, but never fully relaxed either. There's a background hum of cortisol running through your system all day, even on the days when life feels relatively calm. That hum is the lock on the door, and no amount of effort can open a door that is still locked from the inside. When the nervous system finally begins to downshift, when baseline cortisol starts to drop consistently and stay lower throughout the day, something remarkable happens. The body's relationship with fuel changes. Insulin stops compensating for cortisol's interference and starts doing its actual job properly. Blood sugar stabilizes without the peaks and crashes that make you feel like you need to eat every 2 hours. The constant background noise of hunger, that anxious, urgent kind of craving, starts to quiet. And visceral fat cells, which were receiving constant signals to stay defended and stay full, begin receiving a different message. The threat has passed. Protection is no longer required. This is the exact biological moment when shrinkage becomes possible, and it happens before you ever see anything in the mirror. It happens before the scale moves. It happens invisibly, inside, and most people blow right past it because they're only watching for the external result. The body gives you signals that this shift is happening, and learning to read them is one of the most important skills you can develop. The very first thing most people notice is a change in how their abdomen feels, not looks, but feels. The belly softens slightly. That constant sense of tightness or bloating or rigidity begins to ease. This is not fat disappearing yet. What's happening is that muscle tissue and connective tissue are releasing the tension they've been holding as part of the body's defensive posture. Protection requires physical bracing. When protection eases, the body physically softens. If you've ever noticed that your belly feels almost hard or constantly swollen even when you haven't eaten much, that's the nervous system keeping you locked in defense mode. When that feeling begins to ease, it's your biology telling you the state is changing. Most people dismiss this. They're waiting for a visual change, and they miss the most important early signal completely. Digestion also shifts noticeably during this transition, and this is a sign that's easy to overlook if you're not paying attention to it. When the body is in a stressed state, blood flow is redirected away from the digestive system and toward the muscles and organs needed for emergency response. This is why stress causes gut issues, bloating, cramping, and irregular digestion. As baseline cortisol drops and the nervous system settles, blood flow returns to the gut. Digestion becomes smoother, quieter, and more efficient. You might notice that meals that used to leave you feeling heavy and bloated now feel much lighter, even if you haven't changed what you're eating. You might notice that post-meal discomfort fades. This isn't discipline rewarding you. This is your hormonal environment normalizing. And it's one of the clearest internal signs that the biological shift is underway. Your gut is essentially telling you that your body no longer believes it's in an emergency. Energy changes too, and this is the one that confuses people the most because it doesn't feel the way they expected. Most people assume that when fat loss begins, they'll feel energized and motivated and fired up. What actually happens is almost the opposite. The energy that arrives when the nervous system settles is not exciting. It's steady,
It's reliable. It's the kind of energy where you get to mid-afternoon and realize you haven't needed caffeine and you're not exhausted. There's no spike, no crash, just a consistent availability of fuel that doesn't require constant stimulation to maintain. That might sound unremarkable, but it's actually profound. It means your body has stopped rationing energy like it's preparing for an emergency that might never come. Fuel is being used efficiently instead of hoarded, and that metabolic efficiency is precisely what allows visceral fat to begin transitioning from defended reserve to available fuel. Sleep deepens quietly during this period, and this matters more than almost anything else in this entire process. Cortisol and sleep have a bidirectional relationship. High cortisol disrupts sleep. Poor sleep raises cortisol. When you're caught in that cycle, visceral fat is being defended around the clock, including during the hours when your body is supposed to be repairing and regulating itself. Aggressive calorie restriction is particularly devastating during this window, and the reason is deeply rooted in survival biology. When you dramatically cut food intake, the body registers this as a famine signal. Famine is one of the most primal threats the body has ever evolved to survive, and visceral fat, positioned close to the organs that need fuel most, is the last thing the body willingly surrenders when it believes food is scarce. Studies consistently show that severe calorie restriction does not reliably reduce visceral fat. In many cases, it reduces lean muscle mass while visceral fat is preserved. Because the body knows exactly what it's doing. It's protecting its most strategic energy reserve while letting go of tissue it considers less critical. When you combine aggressive restriction with poor sleep and high-intensity exercise, you create a perfect storm of stress signals that make visceral fat essentially impossible to shift, regardless of how determined you feel. So what does this all mean practically, and what should you actually be doing? It means the goal is not to push harder. The goal is to create the biological conditions under which your body stops feeling like it needs to defend itself. That looks very different from what most fat loss advice tells you. It means prioritizing sleep with the same seriousness you give to workouts, because sleep is not passive recovery, it is active hormonal regulation. It means eating regularly and consistently enough that your body stops receiving famine signals and starts trusting that fuel is available. It means choosing movement that reduces stress rather than adds to it, which often means walking, controlled strength training, and intentional rest rather than daily high-intensity sessions that leave you depleted. It means reducing the constant stimulation of devices, deadlines, and reactive urgency that keeps your nervous system partially activated all day. None of this feels dramatic. None of it feels like the kind of extreme sacrifice that weight loss culture says you need to make, but that's exactly the point. The research is unambiguous on this, even if it's rarely discussed in mainstream fitness content. Heart rate variability studies show that people with higher nervous system flexibility, meaning those whose bodies can move more easily between stress and recovery, show consistent reductions in visceral fat even without increases in exercise intensity. Cortisol research confirms that even mild but chronic elevations directly suppress lipolysis in visceral tissue. The literature on insulin sensitivity shows that as stress hormones normalize, the body's need to buffer excess energy near the organs disappears, and visceral fat becomes not just accessible but unnecessary. The biology is not mysterious once you understand what it's responding to. It is not resistant to you, it is responsive to signals. Change the signals, and the fat changes. Real progress with visceral fat doesn't look the way you've been told it should look. It doesn't feel like burning and suffering and white-knuckling through hunger. It feels like a body that is slowly, quietly coming out of a state of emergency. It feels like waking up and not immediately reaching for coffee. It feels like eating a full meal and feeling satisfied without the guilt spiral or the bloating. It feels like walking into a stressful situation and noticing that your body recovers from it faster than it used to. These are not soft or secondary results. These are the biological preconditions for visceral fat to shrink. And by the time you can actually see and measure the change in your belly, these internal shifts have already been working for weeks. The visible result is the last step, not the first. The most important work happens invisibly, and it happens not because you pushed harder, but because you finally gave your body a reason to feel safe. And a body that feels safe, a body that trusts its environment, a body that no longer needs to brace for a threat that never comes, that is a body that finally lets go.